Can't nobody hold us down on turntables and tea. I'm Charlie.
And I'm Cory.
And if you couldn't tell by the intro this week, we are discussing the 1997 debut album from Puff Daddy, as he was then known. No Way Out. This was a really big album, and Puff Daddy's gone by several names since, including P. Diddy. His birth name of Sean Combs is well known too. So, man of many names, but this is where it all began for him as a rapper, at least.
I'm glad you touched on that right away. A rapper. We have to say quote unquote, or I always have to say quote unquote.
We do.
Just for me, this one, me and Charlie were talking about it before we started, but this one, I remember where I was for this album. I remember who I was for when this album came out, and quote unquote rapper was something that was on the tip of our tongues, and I think many others, as far as Mr. Diddy was going down at that point. And we'll definitely talk about it. Talk about man of many names. I learned Busta Rhymes' real name for the first time ever in my whole life because I couldn't figure out who Christopher Wallace was on the writer's notes. And I said, oh, wow, I never knew that.
Wait, no, Christopher Wallace is the Notorious B.I.G.
I said Christopher Wallace. I'm sorry. I meant Trevor George Smith. Christopher Wallace. But, I'm over here tripping already.
Oh, man. But yeah, quote unquote rapper is, he's not a rapper first. I mean, you can even tell it by just his output. He hasn't put out much in a long time, and not even that much to begin with in comparison to others. And he's a businessman and record executive before he is a rapper.
And even at this point in 97, I'll speak for me, but I think for a large amount of the populace, he was the side guy. He was in the same boat as Flavor Flav. He was the hype man. He was the public man. He was the guy that had the looks going on. He was exactly the yin to the yang, in my opinion, that Biggie needed to reach. I'll even go as far as to say, like, the suburban white hip hop listener audience, take that edge off of Biggie. And he did that well throughout his career up until this point.
Yeah, including on this album, frankly. I think he did that well.
I look back at it as I read, and, I'm an older man now, looking back. I like to think that a lot of it was him being propelled and pushed forward, not only as a businessman, because he is a businessman and a great one at that, but just as a person / artist. And the death of a friend can do that. So, that catalyst going forward, I like to think made him want to do this, rather than back then I used to think that he was just jumping on what's hot, hey, he's going to make this album. Of course he's going to make it for Biggie. And that definitely, no one ever thought that it didn't mean anything to him, but it was like, Puff Daddy's going to make a rap album. But it's Puff Daddy and the family, and we'll touch on that as we go through as well.
Yeah, and I think you're correct. A lot of people have a very cynical view of his rapping in the wake of the death of the Notorious B.I.G. There's a lot of criticism surrounding that, and some have even gone so far as to try to put Biggie's murder on Puff Daddy, which we don't have hard evidence to say that, so I'm not going to make that claim.
And I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole either, because we could be here for 3 hours. Yeah. That's a very interesting topic, and something that, if you like reading about things that are unsolved or quote unquote unsolved, there's a lot to look at in that. But I promised myself I'd stay out of that one tonight.
I find it more confusing than anything else, and don't even have a clear-cut opinion on it like I do other music controversies. I just am baffled by all of it.
It's a different
so
scene.
Intertwined.
It is. There's a lot of players, and it's a different scene. It's a wild one to say the least.
Yes, but we're going to not go down that rabbit hole, even though that rabbit hole casts a shadow over the album, for better or for worse, because this was the year that Biggie Smalls, or Christopher Wallace, was murdered in a drive-by shooting. And Puff was already working on this album before that. The lead single had come out before Biggie's murder, but he changed his direction afterwards. And that made sense commercially, but I think a lot of people saw it pretty cynically and thought, how sincere is this? Is he just capitalizing on the guy's murder because that's the in thing to do? Or is it sincere? I'm leaning towards, I think it's a mix of both.
Yeah. Learning that he grabbed everybody up and went to Trinidad and banged out for 2 weeks, stuff that we wouldn't see, or stuff that we would see throughout 97 to 99. I really am on the fence to say if, I believe there's sincerity in it, but I'm just on the fence as far as do I really think he wasn't out there to make money? I think seeing the Trinidad stuff, I think he was pissed. And you're talking about that shadow that's cast over this, but inside of this rivalry, East Coast, West Coast, and seeing this death happen, it can make a man angry. And again, I said it before, it can be that catalyst that propels a man / artist into doing 10 times the load he would usually do. So I found some solace in really looking through this with a critical eye and learning more about it.
Yeah, I would say so. But frankly, some of the people who look at this album cynically are the folks who were working at the record label at the time. In fact, a few people who worked on this album actually sued Puff Daddy over unpaid royalties.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Wow. I read a book by one of the Bad Boy Sidemen employees, a frequent rap writer and featured rapper Mark Curry, and it doesn't paint Puff in a favorable light at all.
Heard.
Definitely shows him as all about the money and somebody who doesn't stay true to his word, and I believe parts of it for sure. And I will say, I don't think Curry was out to make himself look glamorous the whole time. He admitted to his own faults at times, but we have to keep in mind every perspective here, because then again, are they currently working for Diddy? No, they might be a little disgruntled.
Now, see, there is a really fine line between me going off on wild tangents. Mark Curry's a wild dude, man. I don't know if his word is 100%. Oof. Yeah. let me step back on that. But no, I hear you. There were disgruntled people everywhere, right?
Yes, and he was very disgruntled. He even, in the book, frankly, he spoke for some people he shouldn't have at all because he doesn't know them. He wasn't quoting them, but yeah, there were people around who were not happy about it. But at the end of the day, a lot of people were happy enough to buy the album because this was an immediate success. #1 debut week, 561,000 copies sold. That's crazy amount for that time. That's crazy now, but for a debut rapper, that's insane.
This is, looking back, I laugh at myself, and it's neat to look at and be like, oh, you silly teenager. But I was one of them, and I was literally, up until I grabbed that CD, even putting it in, even afterwards, it was a love to hate. I love to hate this album. I love to hate him back then. I really did. I love to hate him and talk shit on him, even though I really enjoyed tracks on this album even back then. Everybody was going to get it regardless. Biggie was on it, period. Jay-Z was on it. I mean, the list of artists that were on it were compelling enough. I speak for myself as a hater on Diddy. Especially back then, I was like, well, we got to hear this shit. We got to hear what's going on.
Yeah, but...
and that shit sold. Everybody had this. I don't care who you were. This was in your CD book.
Yeah, 7 times platinum, so in the US. So in a lot of people's end, 5 top 20 hits. 4 of them were top 2. So yeah, a lot of people were listening to this, but clearly this was designed for mass appeal with the guest lists and the samples used.
One of the singles was, we knew back from 96 off a DJ Clue mixtape. You know what I'm saying? It was already I'll use the word viral, but we didn't use it back then. But everybody already knew that song, and it still killed. And we'll get to that.
It did. It did. Quite a bit of this did kill, and it did win a Grammy for Best Rap Album in 97. I'm not gonna lie, this is speculation on my part. something tells me Diddy bought the award.
What do you know offhand? And you probably do, and I'm not mad at you if you don't. Do you know what he went up against?
So a few of the ones he was up against, one was Life After Death, actually.
No shit.
Also, I'm not remembering them all, but Wyclef Jean's solo debut, and he won a Grammy the year before as a Fuji. Yeah. And then we had Jay-Z's second album and Missy Elliott's debut.
Oh, damn, for real? And that was a pretty packed category.
Yeah, and this was the winner. Something tells me there was some payola involved.
Well, I ain't gonna throw that shade, but there's some albums in that mix that I probably would have picked over top of this.
I mean, I don't know all the albums, but frankly, all of them are better rappers than Diddy. Let's be real. They're all better rappers than Diddy, even Wyclef.
That Missy Elliott joint was great. Wyclef's, I don't know. I love Wyclef, but that album, I don't know if that deserves
the first one. A lot of people liked it. I mean, it's no miseducation, but it did what it had to do, I guess.
I hear you there.
Then again, what is miseducation? What else is close, I guess?
That's
a different discussion.
That it is. So Grammy for Best Rap Album of the Year. Yeah, you know, I don't care if you loved it, hated it, or you loved it. Look at the acclaim. Look at the acclaim.
Yeah, and this won our poll. 50% of our votes were for this album. So
wow,
and maybe some of them were folks who loved the hated as well. Maybe some of them were in that crowd, but I mean, I don't know what else to say, really. I think we just got to dive on in and get into Puff Daddy and the Family and elaborate.
Yeah, let's do it.
This preface a bit, because that's what we're going to do. So.
Inspired by the life of the savvy and ambitious Colombian businesswoman Griselda Blanco comes a new Netflix original limited series. Griselda tells the story of a devoted mother who, with her lethal blend of charm and relentless savagery, creates one of the most powerful cartels in history. Witness Sofia Vergara's captivating transformation into the godmother of the underworld. Griselda, streaming January 25th, only on Netflix.
It's called No Way Out, and it begins with an intro called No Way Out, which is a prayer and clearly a reference to the murder of Biggie Smalls. It's clearly a bit indulgent, and
as is Diddy, as is
Diddy.
I'm gonna say this over and over again. I mean, it's Diddy, you know.
It's him, all right. And this is a bit controversial, too, because there's a whole discourse about, it's a very complicated thing to get into, but from what I understand, there was a lot of debate of, with all this talk about God on the album and in public appearances, are we making Biggie out to be a saint? Because he wasn't. He had a rap sheet. And that was a debate among many, it seemed. And I don't feel qualified to comment on that at all because he clearly came from a very different culture than I did. So I don't know.
I'm with you. I'm sticking to my guns on that, and I'm not even going to go there. I'll tell you what, though, as far as an intro to this album, I don't know. I don't know if you open the album like this, because I think there's other pieces on the album that clearly get this across, and I think they're in the correct spots, and I think they're paced correctly. And I think you lead off with your second track here. I don't think you need this. Even in the 90s, you know, in the 90s, we were almost desensitized to these little skits and intros, and we enjoyed them. We loved them. But for me, this one, it sort of falters. And I love what you said. It feels self-indulgent, which looking back then, automatically we're like, here we go. Puff's already talking it up. Let's go. Let's see what happens here.
Yes, indeed. But it does go into our first song on the album, Victory, which I agree should have just opened the album. And this features two rappers, Notorious B.I.G. and Busta Rhymes. This is actually Biggie's final recorded verses. He recorded this the day before he was killed. So that puts something on it for sure. It samples Going the Distance from the Rocky soundtrack. I think this sample is really well used here. definitely creates an anthemic feel like the Rocky soundtrack does, frankly. And it's definitely one of the best samples on the album. And this is Biggie's song. He owns the song. It's about him. Busta Rhymes does the choruses. Diddy, he's a marketer, not really much of a rapper. And that's very clear when you're next to, I mean, not just Notorious B.I.G., but perhaps it's most proven there, but that's also not fair because in many people's eyes, Biggie is the greatest rapper of all time. So that's a different discussion, but some would say no one looks good to him, but this is definitely gangster rap. And in that case, I think it works for what it is. I'll say that.
All right. That's putting it lightly in my book because this shit jumps off crazy. I mean, you literally got the Rocky theme, boom, 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 boom. As a young man, this is already a crazy pump up for me regardless. I'm glad you said it, and I like that we're touching on this because sometimes I thought it was just me hating, but here we go. On your debut rap album, your first track, you got yourself as the hype man to a great Biggie verse, period. Okay, a phenomenal verse. Plus, it's haunting for me as a listener, a little bit haunting because I know this is right before he passed and he kills it. And then on top of that, you got Busta. I mean, for me, I never forget hearing this for the first time. When Busta Rhymes comes out going nuts in perfect Busta Rhymes fashion, for me, I was eating it up. I was eating this track up. I don't know if on my first listen, I skipped back and listened to this again, but this was game on, especially if you want to get pumped up for whatever you want to get pumped up on this song. I won't tell you what we used to get pumped up doing. This was a fight song. Fuck it, I say it. Like we weren't crazy fight boys, but like this was one that if you were pissed about something, you could play this and get yourself a little bit more pissed off. It's a great workout song too, it has that pumped up mentality inside of it. Or at least for me, the mindset of looking at it as an album and speaking me and you, I think it's an ironic and sort of fitting lead for this album, especially as a retrospective. And this no way out mentality that he was talking about that he flipped into because he thought there was no way out of this East Coast, West Coast. Well, this was one day before it happened, and you recorded a track that was like, fuck it, victory. Like, we are those motherfuckers. I might curse a little bit more on this one. I apologize because I put myself in a mindset of this, but still, like, you are straight boasting on this track, and it's the opener. So in no way do I think this is a concept album, but we always talk about how these tracks are put on this album. I think this is a clever opener, if not ironic, because of what had happened one day after it. I think it fits, and I'll say it again, Biggie kills it on this.
I completely agree. And for some reason, this was the fifth and final single from the album. And it only made it to 19 on the Hot 100. And I mean, once you're at the fifth single, how well is it gonna do to begin with?
Yeah. That, when you go back to that Diddy mentality, even with taking everybody to Trinidad and being like, we're gonna have 2 years worth of stuff to put out. He's always looking, planning. This one was highly regarded from listeners that I knew. So it made sense, I guess, because he thought it would still be hard. Was it more than a year? I mean, fifth single, was that inside of 97?
No, this was 98 by that point.
He probably figured he'd just get a resurgence off it because it's one of the hardest tracks on the album, I would think. But yeah, I'm totally with you. By the fifth single, of course it's going to go 19. We're a year away and people are listening to fresh stuff,
Yeah, I mean, he still spent $2.7 million on the video, though, so...
This video was cool as shit, though.
Then it was all worth it. After all, the 90s had some pretty badass videos. Let's not get ourselves.
No, I feel you. You watch the video for this one?
I didn't.
And it's wild, man. It's a crazy one.
I am sure it is, but I still question why this was chosen as a single over The next song on the album, Been Around the World.
I'm so sorry. This wasn't a single?
No, Been Around the World was a single.
Oh, okay.
I don't get why it was chosen before Victory. I do, but I don't quality-wise, but getting ahead of myself here. And this one also features the Notorious B.I.G. and this time Mace, another person who plays a role on this album quite a bit. And there's the sample for this is Let's Dance by David Bowie, and the chorus is an interpolation reworking of Lisa Stansfield's All Around the World, and Biggie does that chorus. I am not a fan of this sample. I love Let's Dance by David Bowie, definitely one of my favorite songs by him, if not my favorite. That might be an unpopular opinion, but I love Let's Dance. However, it just does not work as a hip-hop melody for this East Coast rap. It doesn't work for me. It just falls completely flat, and it's catchy enough, I guess, but I don't think the verses are all that memorable. And the chorus is all right, but this is just a very odd fit, in my opinion, but clearly I was in the minority because this made it all the way up to number 2 on the Hot 100, and it was 19 for the year 1998. So you look like you disagree with me a bit on that.
No, I don't necessarily. Well, I disagree with the David Bowie hit, but really those eyes that you see and me like grabbing on the beard is just me trying to think back then, really put myself in. The David Bowie for me was what grabbed me, because I automatically was like, what? They're going to use Let's Dance on the top of this? And I enjoyed how they fused it in. I mean, for this, I feel like it's a banger, but only because I remember it as a banger. When I listen to it now, it feels a little bit slower than I remembered it being. I always love hearing Biggie sing, period. But for me back then, this was Diddy's first chance. This was his first 2 verse that we heard from, even with the and there was a strong intro from Mace and his verse, you know. It was okay, and you were like, all right, but it needed to be here in number 3 because Mace did so well, and the song for me hit beat wise that it almost masked the elementary rapping that Diddy was doing here. He got his 2 verses and he did well. Don't get me wrong. It's not the worst I've heard him do, especially not the worst I've heard him do on this album. But I feel like that's why we're up here, and that's why it might have got chosen before as far as a single goes, because they needed to. I mean, Mace was hot, especially coming off this, and people were gravitating towards that. We go back to the family aspect. This is another one of the pieces that needed to be there for this album to be successful. And I think it speaks inside of this track as well.
Okay, that is a fair point. And I just think of there's several pop hits from 1983 sampled on this album. To me, this one was the oddest fit for some reason, but not even the oddest choice. But we'll get to what I think is the oddest song to go after in it, but that's not till a long time from now. We're not even close to that.
Heard that.
I don't even think it's what you're thinking it is.
I'm really surprised that you didn't dig the Bowie piece on this.
I didn't. Then
like again,
it.
It's years after too, so I don't know. It just it fit. It the end of that Bowie sample where it comes like dan ticka dan ticka dan ticka dan ticka was one. Not only iconic, that transition was iconic for the period, but also it felt like that Diddy flash. So for me, that fusing made sense, and it resonated with me. But yeah, no, I was just surprised that you didn't dig that.
I think Diddy did better sampling the one-hit wonders of the 80s, but we'll get to that. We're not there yet.
Heard that.
So now we have our first Diddy solo song, What You Gonna Do. It samples the song It's Over by Eddie Holman. Oh boy. This is why we say Diddy isn't a great rapper, or Puff Daddy, or whatever the hell you want to call him, because this is just him posturing. That's what that is. That's all I hear. And he does have some tragedy in his backstory, but this isn't real. This doesn't hit hard. Like somebody like Biggie, it works because he came from such a rough upbringing, or Nas even, like we talked about before when we did Illmatic. He saw that stuff. Like this just isn't very real, and I also find the lyrics quite misogynistic, frankly, but maybe that was meant to be ironic, but that's not how I saw it, and this just falls flat for me. Not great.
Yeah, I'll use the word falls flat. There's a couple aspects of this song that I enjoy. I love the old school beat loop that is the beat for this. I'm a sucker for those jazz flute loops. For me, the strings almost hidden in the background really carry that loop for me, and I enjoy that as its own piece. Literally out of my notes, this one always rings a little weak. It's not the point of the narrative that rings a little weak, but Diddy's performance on this track rings weaker. Weaker than we heard so far. This is your first standalone. There's places early on where he hits it, especially early on in the first verse. He has some really unique rhythms and almost a unique rhyme because, and we'll touch on this throughout, but a lot of this album, he sticks to this AABB rhyme scheme, this elementary rhyme scheme, and it's easily spotted by especially your hardcore hip hop guys. But now you got hardcore hip hop guys who are looking to hate, and you're not even doing Dr. Seuss rhymes. You're doing like elementary rhymes. But I mean, this song, it has a cool beat. It really does. That's about it. When he gets to the almost like spoken word part by like the third verse, it's going on way too long for me. This could have been way shorter. I didn't dig this. I don't even think I listened to this song like more than twice back in the day. I listened to this song way more going through critically this time than I ever did back then. Not one of my favorites.
Oh, I can definitely see this. This is a skip in my book, but
yeah.
Fortunately, I think we're in a better spot for our track 5, which is Don't Stop What You're Doing. It's credited as featuring Lil Kim, but the hook is sang by Kelly Price. She appears quite a bit on this album and is not credited as a featured artist, which I don't agree with because she plays a huge role in making the songs that she's on work as well as they do, and this is one of them. This song samples the song Don't Stop the Music by Yarborough and Peoples. I think this is a good sample. I feel like those R&B disco sounds really just go well with hip hop for whatever reason. I don't know what it is, but that automatically works for me. And if we want to talk pop rap, this is it. This is a song I could really see going over well in a club and being like a party starter. And I mean, again, we have a great singer doing the hook. She's got a strong, soulful voice, and it really carries the song. And I gotta say, I'm not the most familiar with Lil Kim. I remember she was pretty popular when I was a kid, but obviously I was not allowed to listen to that when I was a kid. No, sorry, Bob.
Popular for all the wrong, well, not all the wrong reasons, for a lot of the wrong reasons.
Yeah, and I mean, she went to jail when I was a kid. Come on. So, no, I was not listening to Lil Kim. I actually remember seeing her CD cover in Best Buy. Oh my, and I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
But her verse is solid.
Solid.
I really think it is. And you can just tell she's a boss and she can throw it down. And she really did here. And she showed that you can see why Biggie endorsed her and had her as a part of the Junior Mafia, because she definitely has some skills that, I mean, let's face it, they were in many ways overshadowed by some of the other stuff that she's done and her image, but this is a strong verse.
Lil Kim, I'll go off on a tangent here a little bit. Lil Kim is to Cardi B for me as far as almost the same sort. They are them girls that seen it, that lived inside. They can do some things, and they can do some things really well. And it's not always just rapping. You know what I'm saying? Yep. And I always respect Lil Kim for that. Lil Kim was a wild lady, a wild woman. But as far as this track goes, I'm so glad you said she had a solid verse, because here we are. And we come off with a beat that for me is almost like a mix of what we got on Been Around the World intro and the What You Gonna Do intro put together. And Diddy's first verse is weak. And then you got Lil Kim's verse, and her precision on her rhymes makes the first verse sound even weaker. So then you got the second Diddy verse, and he is straight in this. I don't want to beat this to death, but straight in this AABB rhyme scheme here. And a lot of these rhymes are the same word. You know what I'm saying? So it feels even weaker for the majority of the rest of the song. I remember back in the day laughing on this because Lil Kim killed it and Puff Daddy couldn't even keep up with her. There's some pieces on this album where I feel like he steps up to the plate because of the players he's around. And I feel like he didn't here, because clearly, if you're gonna rap, if you're gonna put Lil Kim in the middle of your verses, you better sandwich it with some airtight shit. And unfortunately, he didn't on this one. She carries this song, and it's the only reason this song, in my opinion, is cool. It's a good song. It's an okay song because of Lil Kim, period. And we go back because of this family aspect. Now, I start asking myself, could he have even pulled off an album by himself? And at this point, I say no. At this point, back then, listening, I said no.
And yeah, that is very clear. There's a reason I didn't mention his verses, because what's the point after what Lil Kim did? I forget that Puff even was on the song almost. It's like, oh, it's his album, totally forgot because Kim demolished you. But anyway.
And we only heard her for like a minute of the track. You know?
But she made the song hers. It might as well have been on Kim's album.
That's real shit.
Frankly. But anyway, speaking of people overshadowing Puff, that definitely happens on the next song too, If I Should Die Tonight, which is labeled as an interlude. It's a reworking of the Marvin Gaye song of the same name from his 1973 album, Let's Get It On. And we have Puppy, he's not even rapping. He's talking about seeing deceased loved ones like Biggie and his grandmother, and that's just kind of there. The star of this song is the featured vocalist Carl Thomas. And not somebody I'm super familiar with, but I have to say, to take on a Marvin Gaye song, you're not playing around. That is vocally not somebody you should take on lightly. Truly one of the greatest singers that ever graced this planet. What a voice. And this guy, I'm not going to say he's as good as Marvin Gaye, but he gave a great effort. I mean, and I love that classic. So I love Old Motown, and Carl Thomas's singing just is what makes this noteworthy to me. I really think he did a wonderful job on something that most singers wouldn't even dare touch. And the fact that he came out of it showing off his gift makes it even more impressive.
Yep, I agree with you there. I'll even go as far as to let you know that not until I did my research on this, I thought that was a straight up Marvin Gaye sample back in the day. I straight up thought that was a Marvin Gaye sample the whole way through. As far as this interlude goes, we talked earlier about No Way Out intro and being like, was it needed? This is, for me, pretty much the same mentality. So why do that in the start of the album if you're already planning to do it in the interlude of the album? For me, this is like a no shit moment, unfortunately, and I don't want to sound crass and I don't want to sound heartless on this, but it just doesn't, maybe it's my disposition, even as a young man, to Diddy, but it doesn't carry the heaviness of the situation that he's talking about, and it feels phoned in, and it just always sounds contrived to me. I don't care how many times I listen to this, it just never sounds sincere, and I don't buy it. it might as well be a skit. You know what I'm saying? And that sounds terrible and sounds heartless, but just critically, it's tough for me. It's phoned in.
You're not wrong though. And also, I have to say, I don't think what he's saying really fits with the song that we're covering, considering that this is literally a song. It's a love song. I mean, it's from an album about sex. It's bedroom soul, frankly. That's what he was doing. The album's called Let's Get It On, for Christ's sake. And you're going to talk about your grandmother over this? I don't think that makes a whole lot of sense to not in my book.
Heard.
I don't get that at all. I think it's a very, very odd fit. But I like the singing, though, so I'll give it points for that.
There you go.
Yeah. But now we have an actual song, another Diddy solo. Do You Know? This samples Concentrate by the Gators, and the chorus is a reworking of Theme from Mahogany by Diana Ross. I have to say, the highlights for me on this song are definitely the piano's beautiful. And once again, Kelly Price doing this chorus, and this one's even more impressive to me than the previous one because she has a strong voice in her own right, Kelly Price, but she does not sound like Diana Ross much in my book. However, she makes this chorus her own by doing that, and to do that effectively, really, that again takes some guts. I mean, we're talking about the first lady of Motown. She's not the great soul singer of all time, but she's got a beautiful voice, and it got her quite far in her life. So for her to do that and make it her own really says a lot about her gifts as a vocalist, Kelly Price, that is, to take on something by a very different vocalist than her and add it to this hip-hop song. And that's one of Diana Ross's least hip-hop friendly songs for a sample. It's a movie soundtrack ballad. It's not like we're doing I'm Coming Out sampled on Mo Money, Mo Problems. That's not what this is at all. But yeah, I like it. It may be a bit redundant, but I think she makes it work okay. But I don't have a whole lot to say about Diddy here, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, that seems to be the theme, not so much the theme, but unfortunately that has been our topic on some of these tracks so far. And we go into 7. Do you know? The production and composition on this beat is ridiculous. You said it. The way the piano is on this track is phenomenal. Critically listening to this over and over again, I still am not convinced, but I'm leaning towards they really worked the piano around Diddy's slower rap style because it's perfect. And I see, and this is why I'm on the fence, because I sound like a hater again, but I just can't believe that the same rapper that was floundering tracks before is now found this just in and out style where he can fit on this piano. Maybe that's just me. It still feels elementary the way he's rapping through this, and that's why I don't buy it. But gosh darn, that beat is perfect. That piano kills. That beat changes so much while it stays the same throughout this track that it keeps the track fresh, even though he's the only one rapping on this track. I mean, don't get me wrong. You said everything that I wanted to say about the sung chorus on this, but like as far as Diddy's alone on this one again, and if it's not for those two pieces, this song's nothing. You know, I have to think production team knows that. I have to think they feel it, and maybe they step up, and they stepped up. If that's the case, they stepped up huge on this one, because I'll say it again, that composition, chef's kiss on that one.
Yeah, but the last thing I want to say about this is I find it interesting that over a year after this album was released, Kelly Price collaborated with another female vocalist featured very prominently later in the album, Faith Evans. They collaborated with the late, great Whitney Houston in 1998. So That was the first time I ever heard of any of those ladies. Heartbreak Hotel. Wonderful song, I think. But
there you go.
Unfortunately, we're not talking about the late, great Whitney Houston, even though I kind of wish we were. But not today. It's fine. Instead, we're talking about Young G's next. And, we have both Biggie and Jay-Z featured on this song. So my only question is Puff trying to say he's not a great rapper by putting himself on the same song as Biggie Smalls and Jay-Z? I mean, Jay-Z was just getting started here, to be fair. His debut had come out the year before this, but he already had it in the can. He was doing his thing and on his way to the top, most certainly. And this song's got a lot of samples in it. We've got a sample from Unbelievable by Biggie. That's where his part comes from. And we've also got samples of Vapors by Biz Markie and On the Hill by Oliver Sane. And the chorus is a reworking of Little Ghetto Boy, sung by Donny Hathaway originally, but this chorus is done by Kelly Price once again. Why she's not mentioned as a featured artist, I don't know, but it really bothers me quite a bit. I gotta say, overall for this one, even though I think Biggie and Jay-Z are strong individually, I don't feel like these verses between these guys really connect all that well. I think this song's a bit disjointed, and Biggie wins. He has the best part on the song, but I think there's too many cooks in the kitchen on this one.
Heard. You got me with the Biggie verse. That's my my favorite verse out of 3. But that's saying everything really about this track. And I'm glad that you said that so I could come in on this, because Jay-Z's verse was sick. I can see where you say they might not be cohesive 100%. But for me, this is the first time, even back then, where I have to give credit to Diddy stepping up to the plate. And I talked about it a little bit earlier, but now that he is in with Jay-Z and Biggie, I feel like he steps up. I remember back in the day saying that wasn't him on the first verse because it just was so much better than what we had seen from him throughout this album. This is the level that he needed to perform at, and he did on this track. This is a classic track for me. This is one that just nostalgia ridden. But as far as a critical listener, this track really lends an amazing amount of credibility to this album and to Diddy in itself for me. I mean, of course, Jay-Z is going to kill it. Of course, Biggie's going to kill it. I mean, even in the infancy of Jay-Z, as you spoke at this point, his sound is defined. His style is defined. You know automatically when you hear him. It doesn't matter what track it's on. Same with Biggie. They're iconic even at this point. So I guess sum it up, it was great to see Diddy step up on this one.
I agree with you, but I do want to know one more thing about this song. I feel like by having both Biggie and Jay-Z on this album in 1997, we're in some way getting two things. We're seeing recent past of hip-hop with Biggie and the coming few years and future with Jay-Z, because that was really when Jay-Z took over as one of the top rappers. And it does beg this question in my head. Of course, we'll never know the answer. There's no doubt in my mind Jay-Z still would have been a very successful artist, but a part of me has to wonder, within this whole West Coast scheme, if Biggie had not been murdered, would Jay-Z be as big as he has become? A part of me wonders. I still think he would have been big.
Yeah, he would have been big. I'd have to say yes. I'd have to say he would have been big. I'll give you a flip side for me, or an addition for me on that one. I always think how great it would have been to see them, as we find with a lot of great young artists that die early. It's always great to imagine what it could have been like throughout life with them growing older together, and see what they would have come up with, more so than I believe Jay-Z would have made it wholeheartedly and been as big as he was. But it would have been cool to see what they could have produced together. That would have been insanity.
Oh, I totally agree. Absolutely. But it's a question I just can't help but ponder. But of course, we can't rewrite history. So
I mean, I'll give Diddy another one on here, and you just sparked it in my brain as we're chatting. But what a great introspective look when you say, here's a future and here's the past. One, I'd like to credit Diddy by, of course, knowing that immediately and putting them together on this track. But I go back to the Trinidad stuff of grabbing everybody up. I don't know if he was quoted on it or if it was a paraphrase, but he said, that's it. We're going to take over the radio for the next 2 years. So his mindset is, let's go. Like, we are taking over. And I think it was a calculated move to bring Jay-Z in on this adventure, on this album period.
Yeah, it definitely helped boost him. There's no doubt in my mind about that, because for this album, it definitely worked to have Diddy everywhere, because he actually, for over half of the year of 1997, something either produced or performed by Diddy was on top of the charts. There was a small exception when Bop by Hanson tops the charts in between the long reign of one of the songs on the album, but
Bop.
Hey, I'm not hating on it. It's a banger. What are you gonna say? And well, we'll get to why I think maybe we needed Bop in 1997 later on when we get to that point. I think you know what I'm talking about, but anyway, on to the next song, track number 9, I Love You Baby. This one features Black Rob, and it samples the song X to Bay by Ema Sumac. I hope I pronounced that all correctly. This one, very pretty orchestral elements. I love a good string section. Well, except when it's Radiohead, of course, but here it works for me okay. To me, I definitely feel that Black Rob has a similar vocal style to Biggie. That definitely is who I can tell he's probably most influenced by. And I don't think he's quite as good at it as Biggie, but it still works. But he definitely has that real laid back on the mic kind of tone that I enjoy it. I'm not gonna lie. I was actually quite saddened to hear that Black Rob is no longer with us, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Sounds like he had some real hardships in his life, unfortunately. But
Indeed.
because I liked his part on this song. I don't think he's quite Jay-Z necessarily or Biggie, but I liked what he did here. And probably deserved a bit better, probably deserved some more good features, I'm sure. But I feel like this is about the sample. I do enjoy the sample here. I do find the hook pretty annoying, and that brings it down a peg for me big time.
That hook, I'm totally with you. That hook is almost takes, I'm gonna say almost. That hook takes me out of the song, period. Black Rob lends that same gangster credibility that we saw on the track before, and really continues that vibe onto this track. And Diddy sounds okay on this track, yes. But I'm with you, man. That hook is out of there. For me, I love harkening back to the 97 sounds and the skits and whatnot. I love the soundtrack style production with like bullet shots and ricochet stuff in the background. I think that helps to elevate the narrative on this one, the gunshots and whatnot. So those points are coming back up, but man, that hook, love you baby, that's not me, that's not for me, babe.
No. Nope. But I do want to say this right now. This album may have its skits and theatrical elements. There was one skit earlier in here it was after Been Around the World. I forgot to mention but they've got nothing compared to the Fugees when it comes to the skits.
Nah, I mean, and real quick, if we touch on that was a perfect skit for that end of that track, in my opinion, because that's what we were all saying. We were all bullshitting on him. They're like, this is gonna rap now? Like, this is real? Get out of here. And I thought that was actually pretty bold of him to put on there, because it was pretty much like, yeah, right, now look how many I sold. What is it? Would you say 7 times platinum?
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a tongue-in-cheek shout out to all the haters, which can't hate you for that one.
Yes, and the 7 times platinum meant one thing to Diddy and the folks involved with this, I'm sure. It was all about the Benjamins, track 10.
That's real. That's real.
So this is a remix of it. It features Biggie, Lil Kim, and the Lox. It was, according to Mark Curry, originally intended for the Lox for their debut album. But as you said, it was on a mixtape before this. And this might be Diddy's signature song as a rapper, frankly. And, well, I'll say this. He raps about what he knows here.
True.
And that is what you should do. Write what you know, sing what you know, rap what you know. And Diddy definitely knows about money. His world revolves around it. I think that's pretty clear. So this is effective coming from him. But this version has 2 samples, Love Unlimited's I Did It for Love, and the Jackson 5's It's Great to Be Here. I have a hot tea take about this song. I think this is going to be a really unpopular opinion. But I actually think the strongest verse on this song is Lil Kim's. I like Biggie's verse just fine, but I think it's a bit disconnected from the rest of the song for some reason. I mean, to be fair, there's a pretty vague unifying thread here. It's about the Benjamins. We want that money, and that can go all kinds of ways, but that's it.
Yep.
Lil Kim's the MVP here for me.
Ooh, she had a hot verse on this. There's mad levels to this one for me. I'm a hater of almost everything on this track. If we go back to 97 Cory, even Cory to this day, I'm not a big Jadakiss fan. I don't really mess with Jadakiss like that. Lox. Don't get me wrong, on this track, I'll give it to everybody. Everybody did well. Lil Kim, she always stands out. Charlie, I love that you enjoy these, but for me, she always stood out as a crispness, as a almost like squeezing a lime at the end of a dish. You know, that little bit of acid that might burn you if you have an open cut, but it's gonna make the end dish so beautifully balanced. And that's why I loved her like that. But she did, you know, she sang out true on this one. Like you said, we knew this from the DJ Clue mixtape, but even though we did, it still hit on this album the first time we heard it. You know, it's one of them ones that'll always be there. I always loved the little track change into the Biggie verse. It is disconnected, you're right, but it's on purpose. And for me, and I dig that, because he gets the track just goes into a melodic track and then goes back into the old bragging about the Benjamin. I'm sorry, all about the Benjamins. I also, if you want to go into a little bit more about me, especially back then listening, I was never one for the braggadocious tracks. I was never one for the rims and the Tims and the women and the this and I'm rich and a blah, blah, blah. That wasn't me. And it was really a big reason why I wasn't a huge fan of a lot of Dirty South, because for me, that Dirty South mentality, and I think we touched on this back in the Nas and Fuji's podcast, but that Dirty South mentality was really braggadocious, and we get that here. I don't fuck with you like that, Jadakiss.
Yeah, this is definitely showing, I'm not a hip hop expert, but I do think that this is a bit of a shift away from the East Coast hip hop sound we've been hearing up to this point, in terms of it being more braggadocious, because we talked East Coast hip hop here before. Nas, Fuji's, that's not all that braggadocious. This is
in the same vein as maybe for some listeners that aren't familiar or are familiar with newer, I guess, stuff, this is the same stuff you see with G Unit. This is the same stuff you see with Rough Riders. This is the same stuff you see with, and I'm not grouping this in a negative way. I'm saying this is the same stuff you see with like No Limit. This is that group song where everybody's just gonna go out and I'm not gonna even say brag anymore. Just go out and it's a gang song, and not in a gang like street gang mentality, but it's a gang song. This is who they were, and they were running like that. All about the Benjamins, Locks. I could go on for a million on this one. Locks and P Diddy. Anyway, go on. It's still a banger to this day though. It still makes sense, and it still rings true in the ears of the listeners to this day.
See, I'm laughing about the gang rap songs with a whole squad.
Yeah.
Because the one of my generation actually, it's a bit braggadocious, but in a different way. It is Young Money's Bedrock.
Heard. I feel you. It's that kind of mentality. It really is. I mean, Bedrock. I didn't even think about that, but that's
always what I think of when I think of the gang rap song, because that was the shit for a lot of people. Even though I think it's kind of so bad, it's fantastic in its own way.
Some of them end up being like that. Yeah. Oh man. I'm starting to go off on that rant, but the players in this song don't necessarily fit each other, and I used to hate that back in the day too. Like, damn. But then, and that's another thing where it's like I was hating back then, but you look at it on that hype man type of thing. If you want people to take you seriously on this album, this is the fight I have with myself throughout this. Is it a Puff Daddy album, or is it a Bad Boy album? Or is it, I mean,
it's a Bad Boy album.
That's real shit. Like, you might anyway.
But either way, it didn't matter. This made it up to number 2 on the pop charts, and it's considered a hip hop classic, whether you love it or not.
True.
But enough of the gang rap. We're gonna get real and confessional on our next song.
TIAA is on a mission. Why? Because 54% of Black Americans don't have enough savings to retire. So in collaboration with big-name artists like Wyclef Jean, TIAA released Paper Right, new music inspiring a new financial future. With 100% of streaming sales going to a nonprofit that teaches students how to invest. Stream Paper Right now and help close the gap.
Track number 11, Pain, which features a sample of Roberta Flack singing. Good choice.
Yep.
And this is the most personal song on the album. It's actually inspired by the loss of Puff Daddy's father. So when Sean Combs was 2 years old, his father was murdered because of the stuff he was involved with. His father was a drug dealer, and he was making plenty of money for his family, but not running in the best circles. And because of that, that's kind of what can happen. So the moral of the story is, don't be a drug dealer. Don't get involved with drug dealers. It's probably not going to end well for you. Might end in murder. I'm just saying.
Just saying.
I mean, what this guy was we're not talking your small town weed dealer. This was heavy New York shit this guy was doing. So, yeah. But that was definitely the main tragedy present in Puff Daddy's backstory. And frankly, in the rap world, it probably gave him some street cred, for better or for worse. And this song also mentions a interesting incident. This one, I really am very confused about more than anything. There was an AIDS fundraiser held at City College in 1991, organized by Sean Combs and Heavy D, and too many tickets were sold for the event, and it resulted in a stampede that led to 9 people being killed, which is a tragedy. Now, Mark Curry in his book said that Diddy knew what he was doing. He just wanted to make as much money as possible. I'm not sure about that. I do think that his talk on this does feel sincere. He does sound genuinely like he has guilt in his heart about what happened. And realistically, even though the families did, I believe some of them actually sued Diddy, it's kind of hard to put it directly on him just because he organized the event. Just because too many tickets were sold, there definitely could have been some more checks and balances put in place there. And we can't always control a crowd and whether or not they're going to get into a stampede. And it's terrible to say. It's horrible that 9 people lost their lives because of this. But like, how do you put that on somebody? And I actually think it's sincere in this song. I don't think Combs is always sincere, but I think this song is very sincere. And of course, Biggie's murder is mentioned, but because it's in the context of these real tragedies that Combs, Diddy, whatever you want to call him, faced before he was famous, I think that kind of puts it all on the same playing field. And I think this is definitely the most sincere song on the album. And I really like the sample, too.
Yeah, I'm with you. You say New York shit. I say New York sound. This is, for me, the most spot-on New York sound we've heard on this album. The sincerity of this narrative, I'm totally with you. This is a great narrative from Diddy. It's one of my favorites from him, period. I'm going from my notes right here. You really get to see into that window that I always talk about in the artist on this one. And I feel it because of that sincerity. It almost reminds me of some Nas stuff. The way this is layered and the way that his narrative plays out on this, and the beat, I love that beat. That beat is so slick, and it changes just slightly enough to keep the track really fresh throughout. I always have enjoyed this song, but this is one of my favorites on the album.
Oh, most definitely. This was a contender for best on the album for me, actually. Not quite, but definitely very high up there. Definitely like top 3 on the album.
No, I'm with you on that.
Easily for me. I really enjoyed this one. And speaking of top tracks on the album, I'm going to spoil it right now. The next one's one of them for me as well. Track number 13. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Track number 12. I'm getting ahead of myself here. Track 12, Is This the End? This features Genuine, Twista, and Carl Thomas. And it samples a New Edition song of the same name. Okay, good choice. And all right, yeah, this just kind of I feel like this, if anything here was made for me to enjoy on a hip-hop album, it's this. Because I gotta say, I'm not an expert on Twista, but everything I've heard him done, I just love his speed rapping. He's Twista for a reason. I have always enjoyed it. Overnight Celebrity is definitely one of my favorite hip-hop songs ever. Definitely a banger right there. And he does that same technique here very well. I think it's something that could probably get tiring over like the course of an album, but when it's used effectively, it works really well. And I think it does here. And I mean, Genuine, come on. Genuine doing the chorus. You are not going to hear me complain about that. And this is right after he gave us the all-time classic Pony. So...
Heard?
Yeah, he's hot here, and it's not quite his Pony, but still I enjoy this.
That's why he's on this track. We talk about the calculations of Diddy, but he was hot. Put him on that track.
Yeah, and fortunately, I think he was hot for the right reasons, because that's a great song.
Yeah.
Whether I think most can agree that that's a great song, and his voice soars on it. He can sing. Genuine can definitely sing. And I really just like the beat. It reminds me a bit of Darkchild, actually, who really was a bigger pop producer in the years after this. But that's what it reminds me of. And that's somebody whose work I've enjoyed quite a bit. I will say, of the 80s songs sampled on the album, I think this is the least cheesy one.
Yeah,
easily. So I really enjoyed this song.
To hear you say that you love Twista is pretty wild and really neat. And I, you know what? I think you'd be surprised if you listen to an album because it doesn't lose its charm or its. He's a great rapper and he's a great fast rapper. For me, this was like, okay, another track where here we go. Diddy's stepping up to the plate. This one, I don't think he hit a home run with as much as he did on Young G's, but to hear him even attempt at this level, that fast rap, because, you know, it's him first and then Twista, this one doesn't hit like the Lil Kim did, where I was like, why even try to rap on a track with Lil Kim? You did all right. You did okay. It's not a plus victory for you as a faster rapper, but for what he put on this track, I think he stood on his own 2 feet. And I did back then. I was like, okay, look at you trying to get down. And it worked out. This is a cool track. This is a really cool track. I mean, of course, Genuine killing it. But as far as Puff Daddy at this day and age, being able to keep up and not look foolish with Twista on the same track says a monumental amounts of what he got through on this one.
Oh, I agree that he did a good job, but maybe I'm very biased. Maybe I like Twista even more than I realized.
No, well, you probably do, but Twista, yeah, Twista was. I mean, if you're gonna say who was better on the track, of course, Twista. I mean, that's his style. This is almost a chameleon piece for Diddy, which I thought was unique too. You know, you're gonna try to do his style. Shit. All right, go on. I mean, this Twista, and he did well on it.
Yes, he did. And unfortunately, we don't hear from him again on the album.
Heard.
But we do hear from some of the guests from the Benjamins again with the Locks in another song apparently intended for their debut, I Got the Power. It samples Don't Wanna Come Back by Mother's Finest. I don't think much of this song beyond the synth. I do enjoy that synth. I love a good synth, but I don't think much of this beyond it.
You don't, I mean, are you done? Because
I'm done.
Mine's pretty much as quick as that. I'm gonna give you my real notes on this. Again, I know I've been cursing a little bit more than I do on most of our casts on this one, but this is my least favorite track on the album. Always has been. The beat is weak. It's contrived. It's some wannabe funk, Toe Jam and Earl type shit. And straight up, the raps are weak. Jada Kiss is as weak. He's weak as shit on this track, period. And that's not even me being a non-fan of him. This track is weak. I mean, straight up from front to back, it's a bullshit boasting track, and it's weak to boot. Whack. It's whack. I can't even. I'll be honest. From a production level, I can't even believe this made the album. Why? Because the Locks are on. Get out of here, man. Like, nah. This beat is whack as fuck, man. It's just a whack song. It's definitely my least favorite on the album.
Okay, it's down there for me, but it's actually not mine.
I get mad at it.
Oh boy. I'm guessing that on his 2004 hit Why, you think Jadakiss should have asked himself, why did my verse suck on that Puff Daddy album?
Don't get me started on Jadakiss.
Now I think we should do a Jadakiss album.
Ooh, hey, you know I do it for the people, I'll
maybe
do my
we can
best.
each pick an album that we know will torture the other. Now I know what it is. I know your kryptonite now.
Oh shit, Jadakiss.
But fortunately, he is not on the next one. We got another female rapper actually on our 14th track, Friend. This time it's Foxy Brown. And this one samples Person to Person by the Average White Band. Another sample I like, okay. I feel like this song's pretty average overall, and I'm gonna mostly elaborate about the Foxy Brown backstory a bit. I think her verse is okay, but in comparison to the other guests that we have heard on this album, it's pretty weak. She doesn't really stand on her own 2 feet. And I know it's not cool to pit up women against each other, according to the internet, and I don't like to do that, but the comparison to Lil Kim is a bit inevitable, and actually they're not too good of friends in real life, and I don't know him personally, but I gotta say, if we're talking about what I'm hearing here, Kim is a much better rapper than Foxy Brown. And the other interesting thing is Kim more recently is known for having a feud with Nicki Minaj, and Foxy Brown decided to collaborate with Nicki Minaj because of that. And, well, don't get me started on Nicki Minaj. That's all I'm gonna say. Because she's got a problem with everybody. And I think she's the problem, even though Kim's a wild-ass bitch.
No, man, see, it's wild, too, because I said those two names are synonymous to me. And I always thought that's why they beefed, is because they're, in my opinion, very close to the same individual inside of this universe that we all live in. But I feel like you would have said the same thing about Lil Kim back in the day, because she was like that. She had that real aspect, that real off-putting aspect. I love that hard shit when it came to Lil Kim. You're totally on the same page as me as far as Foxy Brown goes on this track. It falls flat. It just doesn't fit. It doesn't fit this beat. Foxy Brown shit is weak, and I feel like this is a doldrum right here for this album. It's not necessarily the pacing, because if you're just listening to beats, it's okay. But as far as songs go, this one's sort of empty.
Oh, I actually think we're in the doldrums for one more song, I'm afraid. Track 15, Senorita. It samples two songs, Little Lady Maria by the Ohio Players and No Me Conviene by La India. I mean, if you wanted to do an Ohio Players sample, first of all, this may be the obvious choice, but you should have done Love Roller Coaster. I mean, what were you thinking?
Yeah.
I mean, Diddy didn't care about getting his samples cleared. He could have done it. They might have sued him or tried to, but he would have done it knowing him. But anyway, yeah, this is my least favorite song on the album. I just find this very bland. And it's an attempt to be sexy, and it's not. And there's a much better song called Senorita by Justin Timberlake on his debut album, Justified. And I would much rather be listening to that than this.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. The point I wanted to make was that bass-driven track, and it's just not for this song, as far as the Senorita song goes. It just doesn't make it sexy. It just doesn't. I am not a big fan. And with this, of course, this is before the day of autotune, and you hear it here. Diddy singing on this track is whack. Like, it's horrible. And you know what? I hate to say horrible, but it's like, man, come on, for real. We put that on a song. We had a bunch of people in here. Somebody could have sang that. This one is another one that's not for me on this album. I wish this beat would have went to a better song. You're totally right, though. Senorita is the end of this doldrum for me, as far as on this 3-track doldrum. Not necessarily my favorite.
No, not at all. But the next song is not going to get you in the doldrums, whether you love it or hate it. And people either love or hate this song. Do they ever? But we are at the home stretch here with track 16, I'll Be Missing You, featuring Faith Evans and 112. The album's biggest single, its second single, and this is the tribute song to Biggie Smalls. And for those who don't know, this song very notably samples Every Breath You Take by The Police for its chorus. A great song, in my opinion.
Most definitely.
And Diddy, from what it sounds like, he was ready to do this immediately. He knew we have to do a tribute song. And this was it. He really got the forces together. And this is based on the Mark Curry book that I read. He said that Sauce Money wrote a song with the Police sample and reworked it upon Biggie's death. And in the book, it said that when Faith Evans heard it, she cried. And the reason that she's singing on the song is because she was married to the Notorious B.I.G. They were separated by this point, not on great terms, but it was a natural choice to have her do the hook. And, well, Diddy, he was very confident in the song. He didn't even get the sample cleared with Sting and the Police, and there was a very nice settlement gotten by Sting, from what I understand. He made quite a bit of money off of this song. So, wow. Yeah, I don't know why you wouldn't have cleared the sample, but it didn't bother Sting too much. Actually, Police guitarist Andy Summers had more of an issue with it. He did not like it at all, but Sting actually performed the song with them at the MTV Awards, complete with a gospel choir. And yeah, this was a huge hit. This was #1 for 11 weeks. It debuted at the top of the charts, and this is the song that had its run interrupted by Bop. And well, I can see why we might have wanted something a bit peppier when our #1 hit's a song about the late Biggie Smalls. But anyway.
Yeah.
So the album version, I think the intro of it is really indulgent, 2 minutes long. I don't need it. Whether we like the sample or not, maybe it's obvious, whatever. It sucks me in. I love the original. For me, it works. Didn't for everybody. A lot of people just saw this as a cash grab. I think it's partially that, but I think it's also sincere. I get why people don't like the song, but I'm going to say it right now. In certain moments, this song has made me burst into tears. You gotta be in the moment for it to happen, but it's happened to me before, and I am not ashamed to admit that.
No, I mean, don't be. And in all honesty, anybody hating on this, it's tough, because from a musical standpoint, it's a solid song. From a production standpoint, it's a genius use of a world-renowned sample that is going to hit the subconscious listener, as we talk about, immediately with that feeling, and that feeling is going to go on through this track. It really, for me, the sincerity is there on this regardless, but that sample literally elevates this to that much more of a powerful, sad song, a powerful reminiscing song, a powerful song of loss. And there's not much you can take away from this song from me. Anybody that hates on it, I don't understand why. I can see the cash grab stuff, but as far as a hater on the whole cash grab thought back in the day, it never even crossed my mind listening to this song. This was just always, maybe it is because it was in 97 right there, and that's how we were feeling. And it hit the heartstrings right, but this is a sincere song of loss. I don't know. I can't even hate on this one.
What can you do exactly? And but really, it's transcended being just about Biggie. I think this was actually played at Princess Di's funeral too.
Wow,
from what I read.
That's crazy.
So it transcended even just being about Biggie. I think it took on a deeper meaning and spoke to a lot of people, because unfortunately death is inevitable in our life, and we all deal with the loss of a loved one at some point, and it is painful. And this sums it up, for better or for worse. And Faith Evans does a great job on that chorus. Even though her and Biggie weren't on the best of terms, you can still hear the love in her voice that she had for him. And overall, I am a fan of the song, even though it's pretty... 1997 was a sad year for the top of the pop charts, because the only song that year that had a longer run at the top of the charts than this was Candle in the Wind 1997.
Wow.
So no wonder we needed some bop. That was my point.
It makes sense now. It makes sense. I see where you're going now.
That's all a bit of a downer, if you ask me, but
heard that.
Yeah, I'll be missing you. Love it or hate it, it is an impactful song.
That it is.
But now we have come to the end of the album. And in an interesting twist, this album ends with the lead single. How often does that happen? Not often, but It happened here, and this was released quite a bit before the album, but didn't matter. It was a big success. It is Can't Nobody Hold Me Down featuring Mace. This samples The Message by Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five. And the chorus is a reworking of one of the cheesiest pop hits of the 80s, Break My Stride by Matthew Wilder, a one-hit wonder, even though Wilder did end up going on to a successful career in production. And as cheesy as Break My Stride is, I love it.
Nerd, yeah, I love that song.
So I gotta love that hook. Can't nobody hold me down. Oh no, I got to keep on moving. Oh man, that just hits every time. And so a bit of a plug here. Recently, a book that I read was The Number Ones by Tom Bryhan. This book selected 20 number one hits that really changed, that show us the history of pop music. And this was actually one of the 20 chosen for the book, which I was a little surprised by. I was like, really, of all songs, this one? And really, he summed it up best by saying that the rapping's not the best, but the confidence is off the charts, which I completely agree with. And he claimed that this was really the moment that rap music became pop music, and that's what it's been ever since. And I mean, I totally agree with that. This is really, I mean, over these past 25, 26 years, hip hop has been dominant on the pop charts. Rap music is pop music now. It's not its own subgenre as much anymore. It's not its own thing. Even in the 90s, like the songs that were hits that were rap songs, they had to make some sacrifices to do it. This one really made that intersection clear, and you gotta give it some credit for that.
You do. That's a perfect way to put it too. I mean, I don't know if I just had an epiphany there or it was just guided towards an epiphany there, but it makes a solid point. It's a great marker for when it happened. I mean, even in my notes for this, Mason Diddy Do What They Do on this was literally one of my notes, and that can totally be summed up by what you said. What we see them do after this and the way that this pop movement goes inside of even just their music moving forward. For me, this is how you end an album. And I don't say that like I usually say it. I say that in the mindset of Diddy. You take your number one single and you put it all the way at the end, because everybody already heard this. This is back when we were bootlegging tapes and leaking. I mean, not that it doesn't happen now, but so much more. So everybody knew this track was going to be there. Plus, it's that Grandmaster Flash, Break My Stride, Rock With You beat that I loved immediately from the jam. And it's like a it's a guilty pleasure song for me. And it even was back then. This is one of the ones that I loved to hate, but I couldn't get past, and I think it ended this album, especially after I'll Be Missing You. It was like, all right, we said goodbye to Biggie. Here we go. Puffy and Mace. Let's put it out there. Let's get it done, because this is how we're going to do it from now on. I think it was a fitting end for this album and a very Diddy end for this album.
I agree. And speaking further to the rap becoming pop point, same here of the success of this song. Puffy and Mace were on a remix of a Mariah Carey song. If that doesn't show you the intersection of pop and hip hop that happened this year, I don't know what does.
Agreed.
But they were. And I think that is very clear. And now we are at the end of this album. What is your grade for it?
All right, here we go. For a debut album under such scrutiny and hate from the hardcore hip hop community, I think that Diddy and the family delivered a full and successful album. That being said, without the family aspect, in my opinion, the bevy of other artists that stepped up for this one, I don't feel like he could have nailed it on his own. And I know I said that earlier. The production value is through the roof throughout this one. And even with a few missteps here and there, with whether it be tracks or pacing of the album felt good. And there's bangers that still live in the minds of listeners to this day, and you can't take that away from this album. So for that, I'm going to give this album a B.
Okay. I'm actually going to be the hip-hop hater here. I guess I'm going to give it a C. I do think it's a bit long. I think there's some stuff that definitely could have been cut out of it. And for me, there's a lot of variations just within the songs, because I can talk about what works, and there's plenty that works. It's a lot of times from the family that's included here. And we can go on and on about that. But my big issue is, even when it doesn't work for me, it's not even like it doesn't work in a way that's going to get a big reaction out of me. Like, it's not like I'll give them credit. Like last week when we did Radiohead, I didn't like what they were doing at all, but it got a reaction out of me. What doesn't work here doesn't even inspire that in me. And that's why I'm just kind of like, okay, because I have to give you some credit if you give me a reaction. But this one, even when it doesn't work, it's just kind of forgettable for me. But I do, at the end of the day, want to say there is a lot here that does work. So
heard that.
I'm going to go with my C.
Yeah, you make some really good points there. I like that.
Yeah. Favorite track on the album?
Young G's. That's an easy one for me.
Oh.
That's an old school killer track. It's either between that and Victory, and Young G's just edges it out a little bit over the undeniable manliness of that rocky crescendo.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, Young G's for me. Easy.
You're
looking at pioneers, and you said it the best, pioneers and future pioneers of the genre. And it's perfectly placed right in the middle of this album. Yes.
My favorite track is This the End?
Dig it.
Because they made it for me, putting Genuine and Twista on it. So
I like it.
That is where we are, and that concludes this month for us, our look at 1997.
Yeah, man, a wild one. Thanks to the listeners for that one. That's one I don't think we would have ever done.
No.
Just picking on our own. That's what I love about the listener picks. They keep us on our toes and also let us explore some stuff that we might not necessarily pick to go through.
I completely agree with that. And fortunately, we're not going to have a poll next month, though, because our listeners gave us some suggestions specifically of what to do. And maybe we would have picked them on our own, maybe we wouldn't have, but it's always fun to hear what the people want to hear. So for this next month, as we know, the Super Bowl will be happening and there will be a halftime show. And with that, I thought it would be based on these suggestions we've gotten. There was a thread between a couple of them that they were artists who had performed at this halftime show at the Super Bowl over the years, including the one this year. But we're not going to be getting to Rihanna quite yet. Before that, a listener suggestion from Cooper Marino suggested it to me via our Facebook Messenger. He gave us 2 albums, actually. We'll be doing them both, but the first one we will be doing is none other than Purple Rain by Prince and the Revolution.
Setting it off with Purple Rain. Oh, here we go.
Yes, and
you're ready for a 6-hour.
we might be, actually. Oh boy, because so much to get into with. I mean, it's Purple Rain.
I'm excited. That's awesome.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's going to be, I already can tell that's going to be a great episode, and I can't wait for it.
Yeah, man.
But in the meantime, just follow us wherever you're listening to us, and follow on Facebook and Instagram at Turntables and Tea Podcasts. That'll be fun this week, especially in preparation for Purple Rain. I think it's going to be really fun.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's Purple Rain. I can't wait. And until then, try not to go too crazy until next week, because we want to avoid what it sounds like when doves cry. So we hope to meet you in the Purple Rain.
Yes.
Too many puns there, but I couldn't resist. I had to do it.
I love them. We will see you in the Purple Rain.
Yes. Adios.
Peace.